Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? And welcome. Who is here for the first time in our Zendo or Taizando? Wonderful. Welcome. You were here this morning. And welcome to our chaplains. We have with us cohort 18 of our chaplains. Can't believe it. I was in cohort 12 with Mary. Where are you, Mary? Yeah, we were classmates. And now she's the director, our champion of chaplaincy. So thank you so much, Mary. And thank you to Roshi. Where's Roshi back there? Yeah, for innovating this amazing program. And Petra, where are you, Petra? Is she here? And all those who support this wonderful program. So wonderful to have cohort 18 here, and some of you are online with us. And last week, we witnessed the thesis presentation and capstone presentations of our graduating class of C16. They were amazing. Just such a wide range of interest and expertise and study, and just beautiful. And then the week before, we did Jukai for 27 people. We've been going at it for a little while. We'll rest after. But I feel like Upaya, and with the guidance of Roshi, is sending forth bodhisattvas into the world. And especially at this time, we need it. It's so important to have people who embody the qualities of the bodhisattva. You know, a time when the opposite of the bodhisattva qualities and the paramitas are modeled in our public discourse. So now we need people who live by vow, who's courageous, who is courageous enough that if we fall off the edge of the precepts, we vow, we atone, and then we vow, and then we keep going in order to serve. Yeah. And the reality at this time is that we are in the time of impermanence, but we're always in a time of impermanence, right? It's just that it seems more in our face right now as, you know, the societal structures that we know and that we thought are stable are coming apart. And this is really what the Diamond Sutra is about, and that's what I'm talking about tonight, the Diamond Sutra. The Diamond Sutra is the Vajracchedika Prajna Paramita Sutra. Vajra translates to diamond or thunderbolt, and Chedika comes from Chedana, which is to cut. So one way to translate the title of this sutra is, Tai uses it as the title for his book, is the diamond that cuts through delusion, or illusion, actually. And in Chinese, it's the Jinggang Jing. Jinggang is something that's really strong. So Jinggang Shi, which is stone, is the diamond. And the history of it is a little, we don't totally know who wrote it. And maybe at around the 2nd century CE, but it became the most influential Mahayana sutra in East Asia. And also one of the most important sutras, along with the Heart Sutra that we chant every week in Chan and in Zen. So like all Prajna Paramita Sutras, and Monshin Sensei and Kodo Sensei had talked about the Prajna Paramita Sutra in 8,000 lines last week. Like all of these Prajna Paramita Sutras, the Diamond Sutra also expounds on emptiness. But a little different flavor with the Diamond Sutra is that it concentrates on how emptiness relates to the Bodhisattva path and what Bodhicitta is and it's not. So in the beginning, very beginning, the first paragraph of the sutra, the stage is set. The Buddha is described in his very human activities. He was going on alms round, going from house to house. He was collecting the food in his robes, and then he was described as eating the food, putting his robe and his bowl away, washing his feet, and then sitting down on his cushion. So the stage is set in the Diamond Sutra for the sacredness in the mundane. The life of a bodhisattva is not a rarefied existence, but one that is grounded in humanness, in the mundane. You know, there's in that one paragraph, our need to nourish our bodies with food, to take care of our earthly possessions. He still had robes and bowls, right? He's still human. And the sutra itself is a dialogue between Subhuti and the Buddha. Subhuti is one of the 10 principal disciples of the Buddha and is considered to be the best in understanding shunyata, which is emptiness. But if you look into his history, he is said to have achieved arhatship while meditating in the forest on metta, on loving kindness. It's not that he was just meditating on emptiness. He was actually meditating on loving kindness. So I think that's important. And then throughout the Diamond Sutra is the dialogue between Subhuti and the Buddha. And it began like this. This is Thich Nhat Hanh's translation. World-honored one, it is rare to find someone like you. You always support and show special confidence in the Bodhisattva. He goes on to say, world-honored one, if sons and daughters of good families want to give rise to the highest, most fulfilled, awakened mind, what should they rely on? What should they do to master their thinking? So that is the question that the Diamond Sutra explores throughout the whole text. So the Diamond Sutra brings us into the empty nature of some very basic assumptions that we have about the nature of ourself and the nature of reality. And the 4 basic notions that it goes through is a notion of our separate self, our identity as a human being or a person, our identity as a living person or a living being, and our lifespan, the contrast between life and death. And it uses the logic of not. So I was a computer science major in college, which is something I haven't really thought about in a very long time until I had a conversation with Lark here, who has studied computer science and electrical engineering. And I remembered after our conversation that our training in that is about logic. It's based on first order logic, it's based on discrete math, it's based on deductive reasoning. And all of this training I found was very helpful in everyday problem solving, in critical thinking, and it really helped me in medicine as well. But I realized this kind of linear reasoning is actually very unhelpful in Zazen. I think we talked about it, right? Because we're sitting there trying to solve the problem of meditation. We're sitting there trying to find the perfect algorithm, the perfect formula to come up with the perfect answer. That doesn't really work. And the Diamond Sutra, things are a little bit different. I'll read you a little bit of the Diamond Sutra and you'll see. Subhuti, the Tathagata says that these particles of dust are not particles of dust. That is why they're truly particles of dust. You get it? So here's another example. Subhuti, what are called wholesome actions are not in fact wholesome actions. That is why they are called wholesome actions. So when I read this, I was like, oh my God, what does that mean with my logical mind? So what is saying is that what is called X is not really X. So therefore it is truly X. Yeah, so I was writing this part of the talk and I was just thinking to myself, I feel like I was in a spin cycle of the washing machine. And after reading the Diamond Sutra multiple times, my mind feels like it doesn't know what's up and what's down anymore. And at that point, Kodo texted me and was like, what's the title of your talk? So I was like, Diamond Sutra, spin cycle of the logical mind. I feel like I just got spun in the washing machine. And then he texted me, he was like, what's being spun out? What's the water that's being spun out by the spin cycle? I'm like, huh. I think what's being spun out is this erroneous perception of reality. And what's being spun out is actually logic itself that we hold on to so tightly. And even though logic is very helpful in everyday life, it is really not reality itself. And so this anti-logic of the Diamond Sutra really just negates the erroneous perceptions that we hold on so dearly. And this same style of writing, it was said, I've read that it was thought to have become the practice of koan at a later time. That kind of non-logic of stopping your mind, of being spun in this spin cycle, is what the koans also do. And it's also influenced Dogen a lot, this kind of logic. And if you've read Dogen, you'll know your mind gets spun and then stuck, and you're like, what? So I'll read you the first two lines of the Genjo Koan, and you'll see how it's directly related to the Diamond Sutra. As all things are Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization, practice, birth, and death. And there are Buddhas and sentient beings. As the mere things are without an abiding self, there is no delusion, no realization, no Buddha, no sentient beings, no birth and death. So he's actually directly talking about those four notions and how they don't exist, but they also do exist. And so now that we've seen the anti-logic formulation of the Diamond Sutra, and I had to get past my slight indignation of this anti-logic in order for me to continue. After I feel like I've been tossed around in the washing machine, I was reflecting on how this shows up in my aspiring Bodhisattva path. How does it apply? And so the Diamond Sutra says about the notions that we just talked about. Subhuti, a bodhisattva who still depends on notions to practice generosity is like someone walking in the dark. He will not see anything. But when a bodhisattva does not depend on notions to practice generosity, he's like someone with good eyesight, walking under the bright light of the sun. He can see all shapes and colors. So he's talking about dana paramita, generosity, and that we have to practice generosity without a notion of a self, again, of the four notions of identity of being human and the notion of birth and death. And so along those lines, as I was thinking about this, I was reflecting on my intention. The reason why I do what I do, the reason why I'm here, and how that intention has evolved over time. So a little background, I was born in Hong Kong. I lived there till I was 15. And it's a very capitalist city. And during that time that I was there, it was at its height of capitalism. And everything was convenient and available at every hour. And everyone was busy and super efficient. And as I grew up, the examples of intention, of the guiding principle for people's lives that I see and are modeled were stuff like making as much money as possible, or to live a luxurious life of abundance, or to get married and have children and be able to continue this life of luxury for them. But I never felt satisfied with these kind of intentions, these kind of guiding principles. And I remember even as a young child that I was looking everywhere for something else, but I didn't really know what I was looking for. And luckily, my family sent me to boarding school here in the States when I was 15. And I was beginning to see a different orientation through my wonderful teachers there. But then in college, following many of my classmates who were all going into consulting or investment banking, I was like, okay, I'll try that. So I went and did a summer at an investment bank. It was confusing. I came out of that being completely disillusioned. I was like, this is what life is about. No offense to any bankers, because not all bankers are like this, but what I experienced in that summer was that there's just layers of illusion over illusion. Just money is an illusion, and you just push the money around and manipulate it, and then some goes in the pocket, and then you just keep going. And then I was just very confused. I was like, that's it? I feel like nothing is really produced. Nobody's really served, except for maybe the bank. And the intentions I see that guide this kind of work is, again, to make as much money as possible, to be as powerful as possible. And I was just confused. So after college, instead of going to investment banking or I did kind of go into consulting, but tech consulting. It was during a time when, the first tech boom was happening. And it was exciting. And at that time, my intention was to create something fun or useful, or to be part of this tech movement that will revolutionize the world. But I worked in that for a few years. I was still dissatisfied. I was like, what am I doing? Why am I making websites for corporations? And so one day I woke up and decided to go to medical school. And I was like, instead of all this, I want to live a meaningful life. I want to live a life of purpose. I want to help people, and I want to save lives. Clay is sitting in front of me. He's an emergency medicine doc like I was. And those were actually very important intentions. They were noble intentions. They got me into a life of service, a career where I served people instead of, just moving money around. And it mostly felt good. I was happy about what I was doing mostly. But inherently in those intentions is still a notion of a separate self. And therefore, there's still kind of an extractive or transactional quality to my life. Like, for example, I want to live a meaningful life. It's like I want to do something that would satisfy me, and so that I can find meaning, so that I can feel like I'm purposeful. And so it seems like these are actually upayas, the name of this place, skillful means. Skillful means are teachings or concepts that are adapted to suit the needs of and ability of the student. And the Buddha gives this example or analogy for upayas or teachings as a raft. Once you cross the river with your raft, you should be able to abandon it instead of being attached to the raft and drag it across, the forest. That would be kind of silly, right? So upayas, when they become unhelpful, like after you cross the river, after your understanding, can become near enemies. In Buddhism, we talk about near enemies as qualities that are close to or similar to, a desired virtue, but actually undermines them. So far enemies are the opposite, right? So for example, for love or loving kindness, the far enemy can be hatred. But the near enemy can be attachment or greed. And so, for example, for compassion, the far enemy can be apathy. But the near enemy can be pity. It looks kind of like compassion, but it's not actually compassion. And in a book that I really like called Near Enemies of the Truth, Christopher Harish Wallace, who is a teacher in my previous spiritual practice in Shaiva Tantra, he talks about these near enemies. And he actually talks about these near enemies of accepted slogans or memes that of everyday spirituality, things that are accepted as truth, that we say to each other, or that we see on memes and Instagram with like beautiful sunset behind it, or unicorns, or and we also hear these in secular teachings, in secular self-help or spiritual teachings. Things like, speak your truth, or everything happens for a reason, or be your best self, or follow your bliss. And this is kind of related to the intentions that I was talking about, right? Like, live a meaningful life. That's also kind of a meme that we tell ourselves. And he goes and talks about how each of these can be useful at times, but can become obstacles or can become misleading. And he says, it's important to note that if a near enemy is near enough, it can actually be a temporary ally, something very helpful on your journey, but only for a limited time, until you develop a more mature understanding. So I think that line in Song of the Jewel Mirror, a hair's breadth deviation, and you're out of harmony. Something that's really close, but actually it can obstruct you. So these intentions that I had going into medicine was actually important. It draws us into service, but it can still become near enemies. So it's really important as we practice to examine our assumptions and our intentions over and over again. The Buddha says in the Diamond Sutra, so Subhuti, all the bodhisattvas, mahasattvas should give rise to a pure and clear intention in this spirit. When they give rise to this intention, they should not rely on forms, sounds, smells, taste, tactile objects, or objects of the mind. They should give rise to an intention with their minds not dwelling anywhere. So how do we close that gap between our mundane intention and this kind of intention that is not based on anything, is based on emptiness? In the beautiful book that Monshin told me about the Diamond Sutra by Musong, who is a Korean Zen teacher, he says, for the practitioner, the understanding of wisdom and compassion and the inherent tension between the two is not to be resolved on a theoretical level, but to be experienced in one's own mind and body. In this way, one finds emptiness and compassion to be mutually supportive rather than mutually contradictory. So this morning at 7 a.m., the cohort of chaplains came into the Cerro Gordo temple and we did Zazen instructions, which is wonderful because then we are all practicing together in the same practice in the Zendo. But there's an unusual step in Zazen instruction that we do here at Upaya. And probably not done in most places, most Zen places. And that is the step of arousing bodhicitta in the beginning of our sit. One way that, other traditions do this is to repeat a phrase like, I practice in order to alleviate the suffering of all beings. That's one way to do it, which is good practice, and we can begin with that. But sometimes that can become rote, or it can become conceptual, because our logical mind can't really hold what all being is. So in our Zazen instructions, we invite you to bring up a person in your mind, someone who might be suffering. And in the beginning of this practice, we ask you to not bring someone who is too triggering, like someone in your family, or someone who holds a lot of stories for you. And so bringing up someone in our mind's eye, and then feeling into our heart and mind and our body for this very real aspiration to alleviate the suffering of this one. And then letting this aspiration energize us and inform our posture, inform our breath. And for me, when I do it, I always want to kind of sit up a little taller, breathe in a little deeper, and then I'm like, I'm sitting in order to alleviate suffering of this one. It makes it real for me. And I always say that this is like a trick, to trick us out of that notion of a separate self. That erroneous perception that I'm doing this meditation for me, even though there's part of me that's like, I know I'm doing it for other people, but it's not totally real, because when I sit down and if I don't do this, I forget, and I'm in this my own little bubble, and that I'm just sitting, to feel good and to do well in this meditation, whatever that means, or I'm trying to solve the problem of meditation with my logical mind. But with this step of making it real for us, it helps me go into the non-conceptual feeling of bodhicitta. And so in the previous quote, Musong said, the inherent tension between the two, the wisdom and compassion, is not to be resolved on a theoretical level, but to be experienced in one's own mind and body. And I want to add that our body actually includes the context in which we live. In the intro to chaplaincy that Roshi gave this morning, she was talking about how the Bodhisattva path is not disembodied, but it's also context dependent. And remember, in the beginning of the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha was described to be in his human body, doing very human things. He teaches about emptiness from the context of his human life. The context that also includes the context of the time he lived in, the caste system, oppression of women, and so on. And then Roshi always talks about our Tang Dynasty ancestors, our Zen ancestors, who lived in the golden age of Zen. But really, in the middle of this golden age was the Anlushan rebellion, where 2/3 of the people died. It was a time of great upheaval in the Tang Dynasty. And that is the context in which they practiced and awakened to this truth of emptiness. It is not just devoid of human contact or devoid of our human context. So here we are, aspiring bodhisattvas in a time of upheaval too. Hopefully not as bad, but we don't know. We're actualizing wisdom of the wisdom of emptiness and compassion in this time of genocide, in this time of war, in this time of unkindness, in this time where the public voices that we hear are guided by hatred, greed, and delusion. And that is the context in which we practice. And that is the context in which we practice to realize the nature of reality, the nature of emptiness and compassion. So Roshi started her time with the new chaplains this morning with a poem by Mark Nepo, and I'll close with that. It's called Behind the Thunder. I keep looking for one more teacher, only to find that fish learn from the water and birds learn from the sky. If you want to learn about the sea, it helps to be at sea. If you want to learn about compassion, it helps to be in love. If you want to learn about healing, it helps to know of suffering. The strong live in the storm without worshiping the storm. Thank you.